I'm Sadie and I'm E.
I'm Elizabeth and I'm C.
Megan and I'm B.
Austin D.
Callie A.
Alright. Talk about crashing. Good old
I feel like we overlapped on a lot of this.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
I think all but one thing actually.
Do you want to just go through the, I think we each had a hypothesis. Did someone write about the 113?
What?
Did someone write about, there was the acquisition learning hypothesis, natural order hypothesis.
What step is this?
Yeah, what step is this?
2 maybe? Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh. Nope. Didn't have one of those.
Which one, what did you write about?
Well, it was just talk about the relationship between research theory and practice. Yeah, we have the same one.
I had cycling.
Oh, then maybe it was 3. Maybe
Was
it
it
was
number
3?
was the difference.
Oh, okay. Not 2, 3. Because I had
Yeah,
the
then I did. I had
input.
acquisition and learning.
Yeah, and monitor.
Chapter.
Didn't we have
Page
the
we're
same?
looking at. Yeah, I had natural
No,
order.
C.
He's like,
I had the input one, and it was kind of interesting because I read about that, and then I had to read about the other guys that talked about output later in the chapter. Because Krashen says, which seemed weird when I first read it, that students don't have to produce language to acquire it. They can just listen, and then they're going to acquire language, which is interesting, and it kind of makes sense because that's how little kids learn when they're babies. They can't talk really yet.
Understand what you're
So
saying.
they can understand it.
Yeah.
But then if you never,
Yeah, I feel like as you get older, you need to be able to
I feel like it's just when you're taught something like how to drive or something, you physically have to get in the car and do it in order to understand.
yeah,
Even if it takes just one time.
yeah, and that's what these guys later on in the chapter were saying with Swain and Van Leer were saying you can't to be able to understand the input, you have to be able to have output, and then you get feedback, and then that's how you kind of make it more clear for yourself. So it's like a cycle, and you're not going to get any better if you're never practicing language.
Because it's kind of like in a class, a teacher can't just keep on telling you stuff. You have to ask questions and clarify for it to
Yeah,
listen.
and talk about it with other people. Yeah. So that hypothesis was kind of weird, but then they did talk about comprehensible input, or they called it simplified input, which is what we read about last week. Yeah, and how it's kind of, for some people, caregivers and teachers, it's almost natural to have simplified input because you leave out certain words or you make your sentences simpler. And it's so true, being a parent, the 2-year-old, sometimes it's I start to hear myself and it's oh my gosh, I sound ridiculous because I leave out all the little words, the and the a, and now that she can talk better, I'm putting more of them in, but when she's little, it's you sound like you're 2 because you're trying to get her to be able to understand. So they were saying how that simplified talk is really how kids, language learners, acquire it the best. Less slang, fewer idioms, lots of repetition.
Which is why I think a lot of students coming from a different culture and country have problems when interacting with other students because the other students don't know to take out all of that, and so they're talking in American slang or whatever. They're nothing's happening here. What are you doing?
And they talk really fast.
Exactly.
It's just their normal conversational speed. And some teachers too. If you didn't know all this stuff that we're learning, you just get up there and talk normal and expect them to be able to pick it up.
Or you go to the extreme and talk really slow.
And then they're okay.
I also feel it's hard for teachers to slow down when you're not in an ESL class, but you have ESL students in your class. It's I can't.
It's
slow it
accommodating to
down
all the students.
because I do have students who do understand English.
Yeah.
So it's how do you find a balance? Because let me stand up here, and I don't want to talk super fast so they don't understand any of it, but I also don't want to be like, then he did this.
Yeah.
Like,
You're gonna
you don't
lose
wanna
all
go
the
to
rest
them,
of
because
it.
everybody else is gonna
Exactly.
get bored and not learn anything.
Yeah. When I had that one student that was ELL and she was like the only one, I had a lot of wanted to spend a lot of one-on-one time with her.
Like individual group work, like do the whole lesson and then like pull the student group
Yeah,
aside and
like
like
she
work
was
with
usually
them.
the first one I checked in with afterwards to see if she could even like get started
Yeah.
or something, you know. Yeah. And reading, like to help her with her reading, it was just me and her, you know, because there was nobody else that was that low. Yeah. And and a lot of times it's vocabulary too. They don't even have the content vocabulary to be able to read or understand what you're saying.
Mine kind of goes like with the natural order hypothesis, like how like language is acquired in like the natural order, and how like not like skipping to like the complex stuff, but making sure it's like step by step for the students.
One weird thing I thought that was part of like Krashen's like it was acquisition and learning like hypothesis or whatever. He was saying that a written language is a better tool for acquisition since people can read faster than they talk. And I was like, that seems very false to me. I read much slower than I speak. And especially if you don't even speak a language, like how are you going to be able to read it and understand? Yeah, read faster than you. I was like, I don't feel like that makes any sense to me at all.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if that's what he was actually trying to say, but I read that and I was like, I don't know about this one. It seemed weird. It's like if I were to just go read a book in Spanish right now, I'm not gonna learn anything.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna be reading Spanish words. I don't know what any of them mean.
I think maybe if it was like the situation where you're talking about where you're only taught it and then you speak it, maybe you could read it faster than you could speak it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that I don't know a situation where that exists.
Yeah, I guess, well, like you had mentioned, I think before, how you, or maybe you wrote that in your post, how you did, when you went to Spain, was finally when, like, you learned more than you ever did in your classes.
Because like in classroom, you obviously learn. It's just like the grammatical rules. How a bunch of us talked about that on our post. How it's like you focus on all that, and like I learned all that, but I never was in a position where I needed where I was forced to like speak it without even like just like subconsciously without thinking about the grammatical rules. So
maybe that's what it means. Like if you took classes for years, like you were just saying, you could read it and write it probably, but then having a conversation would be harder.
A lot different,
So what he says is, it says, since people are able to read more rapidly than they speak, written language is a better source for acquisition than oral language.
That seems.
Yeah. So then I was kind of thinking, like, I don't know if he means written language by like a language that can be written versus like languages that are only oral.
Yeah.
They can't be written at all. So
Do you have that as a question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That's right, I think. Yeah, I was just. It seemed really weird to me.
It was at 6 minutes.
Going back to like like when you were in Spain, like I feel like that definitely goes like the monitor. Like I feel like I overuse it a lot, like especially when I was in Spanish class because I wanted to make sure I was saying it correctly, sort of thing. So I feel like some students like might get stuck in that that they don't want to like share out that they don't know what they're saying.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
I totally felt like that. Like even when I went to go out to dinner or something and I had to order a meal, like it was hard because like wait, I have to make sure like I'm saying the right thing, and it really does get in the way. It's crazy how that works.
Well, it's almost even like that with English. I feel like native English speakers and kids, that academic language is not natural conversation, and so you kind of have to make them aware that the way you talk to your friends is not really how you write. Or how you are going to talk at school when I'm asking you to, talk about some subject matter or whatever. You can't sound the same. You have to. It's a whole different
It's like a
language.
social context thing. Yeah.
And especially now that there's like text language too.
Mm-hmm.
That also that's a whole another component that is completely different than both talking
Oh, yeah.
and academic writing.
Yeah, it's like when kids write in their stories the word "cuz."
Yeah.
That's not a word. That word is cause, and that's not what you mean here.
Yeah.
You mean because.
Yeah.
But they that's how they talk. So
Yeah.
or they think that's what the word is because it sounds like that when you talk really fast. You don't even hear you don't put the B in the front. Yeah. I took a class as an undergrad about, like, the whole class was about how you acquire language. So kind of that part in the beginning of the chapter about your first language and how babies acquire it. And I still find that stuff so fascinating. It's bizarre that you just do it without being taught anything.
And that's like
so weird.
that's like I mean, can you imagine how much learning that is in such a short amount of time? And yet, like babies aren't even trying.
No.
I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah, and it's fun. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, here we are studying and like really trying to learn things.
Yeah.
My dad used to always say, well, you learn the most in your whole life in the first 4 years of your life. And I remember thinking, like, what? That doesn't make any sense. But you think about language,
Yeah.
you learn how to talk, learn how to walk. You learn how to change your clothes and go to the bathroom.
Eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all these
Like most of their
basic
survival
things.
skills.
Yeah.
And it just kind of comes, most of it comes naturally.
Crazy.
Or it's, even if it doesn't, someone has to teach you, it's still like a desire.
Yeah.
Kids
You
want
learn
to
like
learn
colors.
how to-
Like, could you imagine if you didn't know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you could like see colors, but like you didn't know
what
the
it
words
was.
for them.
Yeah.
Like how hard it would be as an adult to like learn names of all these different weird colors. Isn't that weird?
That reminds me too, the other weird thing about colors in other languages is they have like in Russian, they have way more color names than we do. So blue is in Russian, they have like a special term for light blue and a special term for dark blue, and then also blue. And so there's
Weird.
different shades
Yeah.
that have different names,
Huh.
which is so crazy.
Yeah, that is
So weird.
And we have that too, kind of, but it's still all blue.
But it's
Blue,
like
blue,
yeah.
Mhm.
describing the blue.
Yeah.
It's an adjective.
Yeah.
I wonder if, because obviously, like, as a kid, you realize what something is and then you want to know what it is. But if we weren't taught, like, that's a chair, would we just come up with a name for it? Be like, that's.
Yeah.
I mean,
like,
like,
that's
or, like, whatever. I mean, I don't know what babies know the
Yeah.
words, but,
I
like,
know. I feel like kids do that though. And
They kind
Yeah,
of
they
do.
kinda
they
make up
do like
words.
until they know the word of something, they just kind of think like, oh, that's.
Or one thing that's similar will then be like all things
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
are that thing,
Yeah.
So like, what is the one thing that Carissa says all the time? That's there's all the thing. It's an animal, and all the animals that look like that are the same, even though they're all different. But it's like they all have 4 legs, and
Yeah.
they all,
All of them are dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I needed a 1-year-old this summer, and it was like, she would say like milk, but she always said it with a G in the front, so it always sounded like gulp.
Yeah.
And like she would say it to mean like milk or water or juice, like anything that you could drink
Yeah.
is like this one word.
Yeah.
Like it's all just the same thing.
Yeah.
which I guess if you think about it, like, someone that doesn't know English and is, like, wondering what you say that in English, they have their own word for it.
Yeah.
It's like a baby would. But
Yeah.
they're like, that's not the word that it
Yeah.
is, but that's what I know it as.
Yeah, because babies, I feel like they categorize. So like you're saying,
Yeah.
it's like all the things that you drink are one category.
And it's
animals
just like
are
one thing. Like, okay, I know the word for milk, so like I'm just gonna call all
Use
of
it
them
for all
milk.
of them.
Don't get the idea, you
You don't
know.
understand once I start
Yeah.
crying and this is what I want.
Yeah.
Hey, try water.
Yeah.
But there was one part in the chapter, and it was talking about how linguists used to think that babies would learn words and then form complex thoughts based on the words that they knew. And then it was saying like it's actually the reverse, because like, if you think about it, when a baby says like food, they're not just like saying a random word food. Like what they're saying is like I'm hungry, feed me, like I want food. Like
Yeah.
they use the example of cracker.
Yeah.
It was like cracker could mean like I have a cracker,
Uh-huh.
I want a cracker,
Yeah.
I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Like
I like
hey look,
cracker.
there's a cracker.
Yeah.
Like they can mean like all of these different things. So like they're having these thoughts, and then since they only know that one word, like they can only say one
Yeah.
word. Like that's just what they say.
Yeah,
Like I thought that was an interesting point. It's like that's
Yeah.
super true.
yeah,
Because
and it's
the baby
really,
I knew was learning sign language,
Yeah.
so she would say all done when she was done with food or like when she was like super overplaying an activity or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Or she was in her stroller and she wanted to be done, she would say all done. And it wasn't like it was the same. She wasn't saying just finished because
Yeah.
this is sign for finished. So she wasn't saying finished. She was saying I'm not hungry anymore, or I don't want to play anymore, or I don't want to sit here anymore. It wasn't like it wasn't just finished. She like was thinking other things, and then would just like this was how she would communicate it.
yeah, when you can tell how much they understand, it's amazing how much they can understand, even when they can't even say one word. you
Yeah.
know? And I remember like I would, like, and especially you start to notice their memory too, which is fascinating. So, you know, when Carissa could talk and would like talk, like, do you remember? And you could watch her like sit there and think, and then she'd go, those are like, she would say yes, those are one word for a long time. And it, you know, it was, you could tell she was like processing it.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I love knowing how to say no really well.
Yeah.
She would always like it was like the inflection on it. It would like you would ask her a question and be like, no. Or she'd be like, no.
Uh-huh.
And it would be kind of like a question or like you'd be like, okay, you mean yes.
Uh-huh.
But like it's just like the inflection, you could tell that they mean different
Different
things in
things,
what they're
yeah.
saying.
Yeah. Well, and then their words change. So like she used to say, she could kind of say the Y sound now, but she used to say S for everything.
Yeah.
So like you were saying, it was sometimes S, sometimes it was S, like this really long, drawn out yes. And now she doesn't do that at all anymore. Now if she wants to say yes, she just goes,
Okay.
What's this
What?
groan that you're doing now? That's not even a word. So it's weird how it changes, you know?
Yeah.
And what like different kids call different things, like the milk thing, and I'm trying to remember. I remember I used to say something. My mom would always like she'll always bring it up. I can't remember what it was, and then she'll be like, "Yeah, your sisters would call this, but like you normally said it." So it's crazy. It's like differentiation.
Well, and then that stuff, I mean, I admit I did not really realize what sign language, how it was acquired and how it's exactly the same as spoken language. I was like, whoa,
Yeah,
I did
that
not
was-
realize
yeah,
that. Or that nobody invented sign language. I thought it was
Yeah.
like, you know, here's the alphabet and now we're going to assign a
Yeah.
letter to every, or a sign to every letter. But no, it's
like
just
language,
evolved.
it just kind of evolved.
Yeah.
When I was in elementary school, we had a really big deaf program at my elementary school, and middle school, and high school. It's like all the students from like a whole bunch of different districts would like come to our school until there was like better programs later on. But like when I was in elementary school, we had like a lot of them. So I grew up with a bunch of them. I can't sign language now, but I wish I could. But so it was just like, I mean, so we would be in class with these kids, and it's like, how do you communicate? And it wasn't like I ever sat and like studied sign language, but like
You would
by
pick
like
it up.
being in class with them and like watching their interpreter and like listening to our teacher talk at the same time, it was like I could sign and talk to these kids by the end of the year.
And essentially that was, you were in like a bilingual classroom.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is so cool.
Yeah, it was really cool because it's like I mean there were things that it was like, okay, if I can remember one of them. He was like the really shy deaf kid in our class, and I wanted to be friends with him because I was like, he doesn't talk to anyone, Mom. So like I wanted to be friends with him. So like I got an ASL book, and I would like go home and like learn how to ask like simple questions. Like I think one day I like went home and I learned how to say like how are you. So you just go like how are you, and then I was like, do you have a dog? It was what I don't know why. I don't know why that's what I was gonna ask, but like so then the next day at school I could like talk to him.
Yeah.
And then like slowly it was like I would just like learn phrases, and then by their response you could like learn more. So it's just like being, I guess, like exactly like this. It was just being immersed in a language.
Yeah.
And listening to other people
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
So would you just be like, yes, and you're like, all right, good talk, wait till tomorrow.
Well, no, because they like had an interpreter, so
Okay.
you could like ask more questions.
Okay.
Like you could communicate with them because like you would just ask their interpreter a question, she would interpret it back. But then, like, I
You
wanted
had
to
an
learn.
interpreter, like all
Yeah.
the conversations.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So You could just
Is there only one interpreter?
Well, in like the classroom there was one, but in our school there was a whole bunch because there was
Yeah, for each.
ESL kids in every class.
I had a mom a couple years ago that was deaf, and she was deaf and Thai, so she like
So her sign language isn't even ASL. It's like,
I don't
Yeah.
Well, because there's ASL is American Sign Language, so pretty much everybody in America, like deaf people, would be able to communicate with each other.
yeah, which
There's,
I didn't
like,
know that
different
till I read the
accents.
article.
Yeah, I
either.
didn't realize there
yeah.
was. I just.
And then
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
countries have different sign language.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool.
Yeah.
And then ASL has evolved a lot since I was in elementary school because it used to be when I was like when I knew it and these kids and their families, it was a lot more literal. Like you would really sign every single word, and now you don't sign every word as much. It's more
Phrases.
well, it's like one sign can mean a lot of things. So it's kind of like
Uh,
talking to a baby. It's like when you leave out all of like the and all of those kinds of words, you just kind of combine them.
That's
So like
crazy. It evolves.
I want to say like
English.
two, like the word to. I don't know what it is, but like if you want to say to meat, you just like so like this is meat. So if you want to say like to meat, you would just like to. It's like I want to say like nice to meet you.
Oh.
Like
Oh.
you
Yeah.
wouldn't sign the word for to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just like combine it and then into another word.
Mhm.
So it's like evolved a lot even since I knew about it back then.
I remember like in high school, like our ASL like class, they would do like sign songs, and so like the students, like I wasn't in ASL, but they were always like transcribing like the meaning so that they weren't like signing all the words to this song, which I thought was like really interesting. That they just like pulled out what the meaning of the song was, like in those lines, and like signed that because they like, did it along with the song.
Yeah, because you don't need all those extra words that
Yeah.
stick in there. Just probably make it grammatically correct.
Yeah.
but-
Yeah.
So I wonder if you have never actually spoken. You're deaf, right? You just communicate. I wonder if you even think those words.
Right.
Well,
That was
there's
like
signs
one
for
of the
them, so you
questions.
learn
Yeah,
them.
you learn them.
But yeah,
But
how it
But
goes
as
to
you're
your
in a
head.
conversation, you don't say all of those words. But it's kind of like speaking in English. We don't use big words or fancy pronunciations. Like
But that's a good
Yeah,
question.
that's
Like,
a-
what's
It's more
your
like
even,
slang,
yeah, like
like
even when you're
signing?
talking to your baby, I mean, eventually, you just kind of forget that
Yeah.
you're not using
Yeah.
them,
Yeah. Well, last year I had to do a project, and I went. Actually, now I have a student in my class. He was in 3rd grade last year, and he's bilingual English and Russian, and he goes to Russian school on the weekends and can read and write in Russian. And one of the questions I asked him was like, "What do you think? Like when you're writing or you're about to say something, what's the thought?"
I've always wondered that.
Yeah, and he said he goes back and forth. So
Weird.
and at home they all communicate in Russian most of the time. So he's like, at home I think in Russian, but when I'm at school I'm thinking in English, which was
Weird.
like, whoa, how do you
That's
do that?
I've
Yeah.
always wondered that about bilingual people. It's like, what language
Well,
do you
they
think
say,
in? And then you
like-
like think
Yeah.
and then translate,
Yeah.
or you just
Yes.
think in a
So-
language.
And then they say like once you dream about it or something, it means that you like actually know that. Like
Oh.
you'll be like, do you dream in Spanish? I'm like, I
That's
don't
what
know.
my best friend is bilingual, and so she says that she'll think in Chinese, and she's like, when I think in Chinese, I won't speak English. She's like, I don't realize I'm doing it, but when I think Chinese, it will always come out like Chinese, whether I know it or not.
Yeah.
She's like, and then sometimes she's like, she's like, the weirdest dreams are when I'm like the dream is in Chinese, but then I'm like at my house or at school in America, and she's like, that's when it gets confusing. But it's like for the most part, like it's two very separate worlds.
Mhm.
Because I always
Yeah.
wonder if people who are bilingual, it's like if so English is my first language, and then if I learned Spanish and became fluent in it, when I was speaking it, would I like think in English and translate every time,
I think so.
or would you,
Yeah.
would you just be able to think in Spanish and you wouldn't have to translate?
I think it might
Do you know what I mean?
depend
Like,
Yeah,
would I think like,
yeah.
oh, I want food, or would I think whatever that is in Spanish and then just say it?
I think it would depend on how late in your life you acquired
Yeah.
your
Well,
second
yeah.
language.
And I think it's like that moment when he was talking about where you're in that situation where you just have to come up with words
I'm
in
gonna
that
put this
situation.
in
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
You know, where you have to come up with the language, you can't think about the grammatical. I
23
think that's kind of
minutes.
when you start to lose that
Mhm.
translation moment.
Yeah,
you
did
don't
you
almost
ever
have
feel
time.
like in Spain you were like thinking thinking in Spanish, or were you always having to translate in your head?
No, I was like, I don't know. I guess a little bit of both, but because like when I was in the classroom, I was basically just kind of like translating it. So I don't know. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess it depends in like what context and like what you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're learning Spanish, or if you're like learning Spanish while also learning like math or something.
Mhm.
Depends.
It's like I know like in my Spanish class, like some days like I would think in Spanish, like because like I was like I knew that content so well that like I didn't like even have to think about it. Like so like on the test if I knew what I was doing, I would just like not even translate anything.
You could just
I could just
write
do
it in
it in
Spanish.
Spanish, but I feel like
If
you're
you don't
still
know,
like
yeah.
trying to like comprehend and like put the pieces
Mhm.
together, like that's when you're translating.
Yeah.
So
Because you have to make that connection
Yeah,
to what you
right.
learn in your first
Yeah.
language.
Mhm.
Yeah, and whatever the vocabulary is
Yeah.
in your native language. Yeah.
Well, and then I feel like it's a whole other skill level to be able to like go back in a sentence. 'Cause that's what my friend does. She'll like start the sentence in Chinese, and then she'll like throw in a few American words, and then she'll like go back to Chinese, and I'm like, okay, what are you even thinking?
Yeah,
like,
like,
what is
yeah.
going on? I'm so confused.
Well, and that's what this kid in my class said, that he'll be talking and then he does it both times. So like at home he'll be talking in Russian and then sometimes English will just come out and he doesn't realize it.
Yeah.
And then same at school, like he'll be talking to his friends and then he'll start talking in Russian and they're all looking at him and then he realizes he's talking in Russian.
Oh my gosh.
Because
Yeah.
that's his thought process. He doesn't realize. Yeah.
I feel like especially being bilingual at such a young age would be super weird.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
I don't feel like you realize what a skill
Like,
that is. Like we're all like,
I feel like
I know, yeah.
I feel like all of it would be a lot more subconscious. Like
Mhm.
I know
Uh-huh.
I can speak 2 languages, but like the whole process of how it happened and like all of
Yeah.
it would be, since you did learn both of them subconsciously, like you
Yeah.
acquired both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're so concrete in your
Yeah.
mind.
Mhm.
that-
which it's almost like in that situation he has to consciously remind himself
Yeah.
that he needs to speak in English in this
Yeah.
situation.
Mhm. Yeah, and one of the other questions I asked him was, you know, I wanted to know if he could figure out what was difficult for him between, you know, like knowing all these things in Russian and then what was difficult for him in English. And he's a very intelligent kid beyond being bilingual. He's just like incredibly smart. So he was actually able to articulate just one thing though. He said that in so like for example we say like furniture and we don't put an S on the end of
Oh,
it even
yeah.
though it's plural. And so that was the one mistake that he would make. He would put S's on the ends of lots of things, which is a really common ELL thing. And so he would say like furnitures.
Yeah.
And he knew that he did that in his writing especially, but that was really the only thing that he could say. And I think other kids would, like you were saying, they would have no idea. He just is like incredibly smart anyway. But to be able to
Yeah.
say something
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
yeah. But I don't think most kids would be able to articulate that.
Well, and I wonder if it would be different if it was a different language. Because like Spanish, like you don't put S's on the ends of things, right?
Mhm.
Like you say like right?
Day.
yeah.
Yeah. So if you say
Yeah.
So
you
like,
kind of do it in like
instead
in
of like my
reverse.
mom's car, it's like the
The
car
car
of my
like
mom.
the possessive.
Yeah.
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 Like the whole plural thing is different. So like, I wonder if Spanish speakers would like, who are bilingual with English would like do something different.
Like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it
And
would
also,
depend on
like-
your
Like they would put the plural,
How
they
the
wouldn't like add
adjective-
an S, but they would
yeah.
say like something of.
Or how like the adjectives come after the
Mhm.
noun.
Yeah.
Like if they switch that too.
So if we're this confused about like just another language, I can't imagine what it would be like for an ASL with a different sign language. Like, can you imagine how weird?
Yeah.
Well, because I feel like ASL students, like obviously they'll never be bilingual, or they
Yeah.
can't. Like they can't. Well, I mean.
Yeah, I guess they could know
can,
two
yeah.
different sign languages, but
Yeah.
that would be
But, like
bizarre.
you can't ever speak a language, so it's like,
Yeah.
are they even? Like this is weird, but like, are they even ELL students? Like they can't really be ELL students,
Yeah,
right?
you're not learning English.
Because you can't.
You're learning
You
sign
can't
language.
And then, like,
You're
how do
just
these
trying to like
students?
learn academic sign language?
But I guess it's
It's
ELL,
like a whole
Yeah.
other category,
right? But I guess
Yeah.
they're ELL in the sense of like.
But then like
No,
ASL
but, like,
and
writing.
English are connected. So then in
Yeah.
other countries, like the French sign language would be
Yeah.
connected to the French
So,
language.
I wonder
I don't know.
if a French sign language or if a deaf French person came over here, would they have to go to like an ASL
school.
Yeah.
They
Well,
probably would.
Like, would there be like
Because
a
I know they're
bilingual
different, but I wonder
class
like
of that?
how different the sign language,
Yeah.
Because
like
like
the different sign languages
Well,
are.
it did say that it's almost like an accent kind of, or a dialect,
Yeah.
so like, you know, the
Like,
southern
well,
part of the United States
I
has a
wonder
whole
if they
different way of
different
talking.
groups.
Mhm.
Because they said like
Different
dialect, so I wonder if it's like Washington versus like Texas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Or if it's like America versus China.
Yeah.
I think it's probably both.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Because it was talking about like
Based on
similar political views and
Yeah.
interests, and those are the
Yeah.
people that end up having the same sign language.
So it's just like a culture.
yeah, so
Yeah.
culture, each culture.
And I know that like deaf culture is like a very strong culture. Like deaf people, like a lot of people who are deaf don't want to get the cochlear implant because they don't want to be able to hear. Like they feel so like connected
Yeah.
with their deaf culture.
And
They
that's
don't
like
wanna
how they
hear.
were born, and
Yeah.
that's
That's
just
what
yeah.
they're used to.
It's like I watched a video on this in a psychology class a few
I think
years
I
ago.
did too.
And they were talking about how some deaf parents really want their kids to become part of normal society and like be able to hear and be able to communicate like that, and other parents are really proud of their deaf culture, and if like they do end up having deaf kids, they like don't want them to be able to hear at all, like because they don't
Kind of
see it, they don't
same
see it
as
as like a disability or like a
Like
something that can
Like
hold you
learning
back.
a new
Yeah,
language.
like when Spanish-speaking parents don't want them to speak Spanish at school because
Yeah.
they want them to, or the
Or
opposite,
they
Yeah.
don't want them to speak.
or they don't want them speaking English at home because
Yeah.
they don't want them to lose their
Yeah.
Spanish. It's kind of the same
Yeah.
thing.
Like before I'd seen that video, I never really thought of like being deaf as like culture.
So I was searching this up because I have an uncle or great uncle that's deaf, and so I've always been really interested. So I kind of like got back into it and I was researching it. And there's a TV show. It's on ABC Family. It's
Oh,
Oh yeah.
I can't
switching
Switch
Switch
to
to
Flippr.
Switch to Flippr.
Yeah. And so it's about like, and I was reading about it. It's talking about this whole deaf community, and so they've like added more and more people that are deaf. I've never watched
that's
it,
cool.
But it
I've seen
sounded
like
so
readings
interesting.
for it.
but I think it like really resembles that community.
Yeah.
Good job, ABC Family.
Yeah.
Proud of you. But like there's like there's like a deaf school, and like
Yeah.
it's just really interesting.
Yeah.
That is
It's
really
cool. I think it's really like misunderstood because
Yeah.
we, all this whole class, this is this one little piece of this class
Yeah,
that we're
right.
learning about,
Mhm.
even though it's really the same thing as everything else that we've been.
Yeah, like
Well,
it's a
learning.
language.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's almost like behind an ELL student in a way, because it's like, at least an ELL student, anyone can attempt to communicate with them, but when it comes to a deaf student, like, what do you do, point at things? I mean, like,
Yeah.
as sad as that is,
Yeah.
but that's an even harder.
Well, there can't be a
boundary.
back and forth.
Exactly.
If only one of
But I
you-
also feel like sign language students get a lot more help. They have like one-to-one interpreters
Right.
that like
Yeah.
walk like so in my high school we had students and it's like not every deaf student had the same schedule, so every deaf student had their own interpreter. So like if there's a
So
deaf
just
student
think
in
if we
class,
did that for ELL
Yeah.
kids, how
Yeah.
much
but I
better we
mean
would
it's like
do.
well, why don't we?
But at
Like-
the same time, that almost, like, I feel like as an ELL student, sometimes they don't want to be identified as the ELL
Yeah.
student, so having an adult walk around with you.
Yeah.
But like I mean wouldn't the same go for an ASL student? Like
Yeah.
I mean you can't hear, so like I mean I get it.
So you
But at the same time, it's like everywhere you go, it's like, oh, this person can't
There's
hear
the
you.
deaf
Yeah.
kid.
Here's the deaf kid.
Yeah.
Here's the deaf kid.
Yeah.
Here's the deaf kid. Everywhere you go, like.
And even though they
it's the
can't
same-
hear that, like, they're still aware
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
bullying and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, and then like you were saying, that baby you were watching learn sign language, and so many
Yeah.
parents teach
So many parents
their
teach it.
kids
yeah.
sign language, and we did a few things, and she'll still like do please
Yeah.
sometimes
And I
when she.
feel like that's all that ever.
Yeah, and then it goes away.
Yeah.
It's just like the basic needs, and that's when
Yeah.
they can understand, and they get so frustrated because they can't say it yet, and so
Yeah.
then the sign
And then their
language
voice
helps.
will
Yeah.
act it out, like
Hunger,
yeah.
please
More.
and thank you. More,
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, that's what my cousin taught his baby. It's so cute.
And please, isn't please like around
Yeah,
like this?
yeah.
But she would go, please, and like wipe her tummy.
Very
please. Yeah.
Eleanor would always go, Mo.
Mo.
And it was
So
the cutest
cute.
thing ever. They pick it up so fast too. You
And
only
then they
have to
like
do it a
get the
few
word
times.
with it too. and
Yeah.
It's so and then they get like half the word and it's so cute.
It is. Yeah, it's adorable. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of cool too, because if you think about it, you could be bilingual
It's sign
Yeah.
in
language.
sign
Yeah,
language if you were a
kept-
hearing
yeah,
person, if
yeah.
you kept teaching
Well, like
that.
there are. That's what interpreters are.
Yeah.
That's what sign language
Yeah.
interpreters are.
Yeah.
Bilingual.
Is that like a
It's
box
signing.
when applying to college and whatnot? Because there's like mark if you're bilingual and it has all the categories. But
I
is
don't-
that?
I think it would be other. Like I know that's weird,
Yeah.
but like it would just be other because I feel like people don't.
It's not
Don't
considered.
acknowledge
it,
Well,
yeah.
that's why I had to read that article about is it a real language?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably, I think a lot of people think it's not.
Yeah, because in high school I remember like people would be like, oh, there's the ESL classes. That's not like a real foreign language though. Like,
Oh yeah, it's like
Because language is so associated with your
like
voice.
speaking.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's the way they communicate. It's
Yeah.
a language.
Yeah.
I thought that article was interesting. I was just saying like it has all the same like parts of speech and all
Uh-huh.
the same
and like it's wired the same.
yeah,
and,
all
like,
of the same
everything.
things as a normal language. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like I never thought about that.
Well, and then the people that are the most fascinating to me are the ones who end up learning how to speak even though they're
After.
deaf.
Yeah.
And then they kind of they don't sound completely
Yeah,
right because
but
they
they
can't hear all the
still-
sounds, but
yeah.
they can still communicate with their voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though they can't hear.
I know students who got
how
the
do you do
cochlear
that?
implant, and it was like, it's like really weird at first
Mm-hmm.
because like they can kind of, like, because the volume can be turned up and down on it, so like when they first get it, it's turned way down since like
Yeah.
hearing is this huge new thing, so that they're not like overwhelmed by sound. So they slowly like can pick up
Yeah.
like a little bit, and then like as time goes on, like their voice is never really completely normal.
Yeah.
They can like kind of.
And their brain, like depending on when they got it, their brain would have never had to process sound. before.
Yeah, so that's why it's like, if you get it, so I knew a kid who got it when we were in like late elementary school, and it was like just really slowly like learning how to speak.
Well, it's like,
Yeah.
have you seen the videos on Facebook where it's
The
like people
babies.
like hearing for the first time?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're
It made
shocked.
me cry when I watched it. It was so exciting when they can hear. They get
Yeah.
so excited.
And it's always like hearing their mom, which was always the sad part. But if you think about it, like, I bet you imagine, like, you see their lips moving. Like you imagine it one way, and then I feel like I'd be so surprised, like, oh, nope, that's not what I imagined. I got a deep voice, mom, or something like that.
But you're right, like they like say their name and the little baby's just like their face just
yeah.
lights up.
Yeah.
It is cute.
One of those is on my Facebook today.
Yeah.
Like also, do you think they have expectation of what they're supposed to sound like? Because I mean, if you've never heard it before,
Yeah.
that's what do you?
What do you think?
Well, and then I guess your association with your parent would be like by sight, like you get
Yeah.
excited to
Yeah.
see them,
Yeah.
but you would never be able to like hear.
Yeah.
So.
So I wonder if
It's
Or like
it's
talking
more
on the
like
phone
saying, like,
too,
touch.
like once you're able to hear and like how that sounds too.
I
So-
had a best friend from elementary school, and her mom was deaf. So it was like, I mean, she couldn't like talk to her on the phone. It was all they
Yeah.
like have to text. And
Well, they
Oh
have
my
crazy phones for deaf people too.
Yeah.
I don't really know how they work, but they
Yeah.
can like pick up the phone.
And like
Some
video
parent
chat,
had-
right?
Or like
Really
some
weird,
sort
yeah.
of weird like Morse code type thing.
Yeah.
Like
But now like she said like FaceTime helps a lot.
Yeah.
That would be
I
really.
mean, you can sit there
Yes.
and like you can
you could just
Design.
sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, technology I'm sure for deaf
Oh,
people
yeah.
is like
Great.
so
Yeah.
awesome
Yeah.
now.
So I wonder, when people are blind, like their senses are heightened. So I wonder when you first get your hearing, if like obviously we all can recognize each other's voices, but I wonder if like you can absolutely like recognize people's, I feel like
right away.
yeah, like right,
it's
you hear your mom's voice for the first time, you're like, instantly,
Yeah.
I know that's her.
Yeah.
So if I like
I wonder
close
if
my
it's,
eyes,
like,
would
the
I know?
opposite because you haven't been exercising that like
Exactly.
Yeah.
like if you're blind, like all your other senses are heightened. So if you're deaf, all your other senses are heightened, and then when you gain your hearing back, is that one still like less?
Right.
Or
Or how
is it-
long would it take to like
Yeah,
catch
like-
up?
Yeah.
Question?
Yeah.
How do we wanna word
37.
it?
Um,
Does your sense of hearing or I don't know if we can figure out how to word it
maybe
out.
like
Okay.
the never mind.
Do your senses even out
Yeah,
after
yeah,
you
like
gain
how-
your hearing?
Are you always a step behind if you lose that certain sense, even if it's hearing, like or seeing or whatever?
Yeah, because you were saying like the kid got the cochlear implant in late elementary school and then his voice never sounded quite
Yeah.
right, but I wonder if when babies get it, if they would,
Like baby girl.
Yeah.
yeah, if eventually you
There
would
was
never
a
be able
girl-
to tell.
in my elementary class, and she got it like before we were in kindergarten, and she sounded pretty normal. Like, I'm pretty sure even like in kindergarten, she sounded so. Yeah, I guess it is. Just depends on
Which is like acquiring a second language, because you're a lot more fluent in it
susceptible.
if you,
to,
yeah, if you acquire it when you're really little.
Yeah.
Well, and then it's like your vocal cords, if you never use them, I'm sure it's like a muscle that like
You need
it
to
needs to be
Yeah.
used.
Yeah. Well, babies, I think we talked about this way back in like one of the first posts, but babies before they're 6 months can hear all sounds in no matter what language, and then after about 6 months they start to, their brain like blocks out,
Yeah.
and only they can hear their native, their first language sound.
Weird sounds if you go to like Sweden or like weird places.
Yeah, where
They
they
have
have,
well, like Sweden's not weird, but like there are like weird
where they have like
places
the
that have
tonal
like the,
languages,
yeah.
like Chinese and.
I mean, like Thailand
and
has
watch
like
the video on.
Mhm. Yeah, well, so then when Carissa was really little, we would play like multicultural music, like Spanish. Oh, this will help her brain develop these extra sounds.
She's just gonna start speaking Spanish all by herself.
Yeah, no, neither of us. Well, my husband can kind of speak Spanish, but not really. Yeah.
Unless you guys have more you want to talk about.
No, I mean we have our questions.
Yeah.
I feel like we were all just so interested in sign language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been wanting it last time too. So. Perfect.
I was on one